Welcome to Undressing Intimacy, where we cut through the bullshit
Greggy,
so we can get naked.
you can't say that.
Why not? How would you say it then?
Well, maybe more like, welcome to Undressing Intimacy, where we undress emotionally so we can undress physically.
That's exactly what I said. Not sure what the problem is. Welcome to episode
Number 36.
All right. This is real life. Our challenges continue. I am back from Vegas, obviously, as you can see that, and we apologize for the poor audio quality of last time. But man, it's given us fits. We've been trying for an hour to try to get this thing to work, so we're going to do our best.
Descript has made some changes.
Yes, software updates have made us not work so well.
Thank you, Descript. In general, though, I want to say Descript has been amazing and wonderful to record in, but something happened, so we'll have to investigate that, although Greggy has been investigating for quite a while. And
yeah. Anyway, just thank you for everyone for tuning in. Apologize for the bad audio there from Las Vegas. I just want to take a quick second to tell you all a story and what an amazing week we actually had last week in Las Vegas. I really learned last week that life is really about relationships and who you know and how you connect to them everywhere we go, especially in our marriages. And that's why we do this. But a few years ago, I was able to come across a horse that everyone had given up on. They had donated this horse to a therapy center that I was working at the time because he had a degenerative disease called navicular in his front feet, and he no longer had been showing. I fell in love with this horse completely.
he's so lovable, though.
His name is Clifford, and he's like a big red puppy dog.
Yeah, he's so lovable.
And I fell in love with this horse, and there was one of my volunteers who was volunteering there as she went to medical school down in Fort Worth. And she'd been riding since she was about 5 years old and had shown horses all over the place. And she fell in love with Clifford just as much as I did. Well, when he flunked out of therapy because he's a little stubborn, like his pops, and he wants you to tell him exactly what to do. And if you don't, he's not going to help you out. So I'd put even my most able-bodied riders on him, and they would still struggle. Now, at least he wasn't a complete jackass. He didn't try to buck him off or anything like that. But he would just stop and wouldn't go because he's like, you're not telling me what to do, so I'm just going to do nothing. So finally, the therapy center realized this wasn't going to be a good match, and I was lucky enough to get Clifford. It was a great blessing because he actually had first rights of refusal back to his original owner. I guess not his original owner, but the last owner that had him. And this owner really said, hey, I want him to go to someone that loves him. Will Greg take care of him and love him? And they said yes. And so I was lucky enough to get him. And when I found out that my good friend Alexis, who was volunteering there, had never ridden at a world show, I looked at her and said, let's get Clifford ready to go ride. And before you go to residency, we're going to go to a world show. That was 2 years ago. Alexis just graduated from her medical school, and she's heading off to Cincinnati for residency. And so she's not going to be here anymore. And this was our only opportunity to go show at a world show. Was in Vegas. People thought we were nuts.
Mm-hmm.
They thought we were crazy, especially because we had to take extra care of Clifford because of his navicular. And we did everything we could. We poured our hearts into that guy, and we hoped and we prayed, and we decided we're going to do it. So we sent him off to Vegas, and we were...
Wait, let me just interject here
Yeah.
for a moment. You have also taken him to some other shows, not world shows, and he had some struggles with his feet there. You two did an amazing job getting him ready, but he really struggled. And so even being able to get him ready for this show was a big leap of faith.
Right. Yep. There's nothing like being in the middle of a show arena and having someone come and tap you on the shoulder, like figuratively, because I can't reach your shoulder from the ground. But, sir, you're going to have to leave because your horse isn't sound. And it's really, really not fun at all. So, this was a huge leap of faith, but a lot of people got involved. The lady that owns the property where Clifford is boarded, which literally is behind our house, it really helped us out. One of our trainers. And then they were really concerned about getting hauled all the way to Vegas. And so I was going to haul him in my little trailer, and my trainers, there's no way he'll make it because that little trailer is going to be bouncy. You're going to be driving forever. So you need to haul him somewhere. And I couldn't believe the amount it cost to haul a horse to Las Vegas. And I'd signed someone up to go do it. But the last minute, the gal that owns the property that he's boarded on was at a horse show. And she said, hey, I found another trainer going to Vegas, and she has a spot for you, and she'll take Clifford. It was literally like dropping my child off at summer camp when I've dropped Clifford off to go to Vegas. We talked about it in our last podcast about how I kind of failed at Mother's Day because of it. But he got there safely. The people that I met, these trainers that I met, were the most amazing human beings I think I've ever met. The main trainer has stage 4 cancer, and yet she shows up every day and she just works, and she's a wonderful human being.
Just an energetic, alive, kind, amazing, bright soul.
I actually got food poisoning the first night I was there. I haven't quite lost my dinner that way in years and years and years. But I was laying in bed not feeling very well, thinking there's no way that I cannot get out of bed and go and do this if the example I have of this badass that gets up every day, stage 4 cancer, and does this with an attitude. And so she was so inspirational to me. And her assistant was the most funny, loving person I've ever met. Just amazing. Just amazing. I guess I tell you this because why there was a lot of hope that went into it. There was a lot of nerves this wasn't going to happen and it wasn't going to work. We got put together with some of the most fabulous people that I probably would have never met if I hadn't gone through this. And we worked with them, and they were such a great blessing to us. And we showed Clifford at a world show.
He did so well.
And he was fantastic.
You.
Yes, he was fantastic.
He actually loves shows. You can tell he loves the attention. He loves all of the performing. He loves to be just doted on. They band their hair. They put in extra tails. They shine him up. They polish their feet. They just get him all ready to go. And he loves it.
Last week was a great blessing. It was a great blessing to do what we said we're going to do. 2 years ago, we said we're going to go do this, and it took a lot of hard work. My good friend and I poured into Clifford daily. He was not in shape when we first got him.
Not at all.
And we had to ride a lot to get him in shape. I didn't really ride very well. I had another good friend that told me, hey, if you're going to show at a world show, you might want to learn how to ride. While everyone else was telling me I was doing great, she was honest enough to tell me that I needed to learn how to ride. And my good friend, I asked her, I said, hey, really, she's become my daughter. She's like my oldest daughter's age. So we kind of adopted her. And I asked her at dinner that night, I said, how bad am I? And she says, you're pretty bad. And I said, why didn't you tell me that? He says, because you're letting me ride your horse for free. And I said, fair enough. But I asked her, I said, okay, you need to help me learn how to ride. And she said, I'll do my best. And we really spent a lot of time doing it, poured our heart into this guy and each other, and we went and did it. And my first event, I didn't make the callbacks. And so at these world shows, they have lots of people in there showing, and then they call back as a smaller group, and then they place you in that smaller group. And the first one I didn't call back, and that was disappointing. But when watching the video, I saw all the things that I needed to work on. And I promised myself I was going to work on them the next day. This assistant trainer took me out, and she was so good. She was so good with me. And I went back 2 days later, and guess what? I made the callbacks on my next event. And that was something I was really proud of. And I watched that video, and I said, that's the best I could ride at that moment. And it was very fulfilling. So I guess I wanted to just say this because, again, the reason why we do what we do is because of relationships. And watching those blossom and grow, it's amazing to do. But it also reminds me of not only the relationships we have, and these intimate relationships between our spouses are important, but all the relationships we have in our lives. It's really what life's about,
Mm-hmm.
is making these connections and enjoying these people and committing to do something to one another and following through. Thank you to everyone out there that just poured their heart and soul into this Clifford. He is such a goofball, but yet everyone loves him to
How
death.
can you not love
Like,
him?
those two trainers that took him, they said, "We knew you were going to be our people because your horse was such a goofball. We knew that we would get along just fine." And they totally fell in love with Clifford and they poured into him. The owner of the property he's on, she poured into him. The trainer that's here and helps us out, she poured into him. My friend and adopted daughter, she poured into him. And it was a blessing for both of us. You could tell he enjoyed himself and he was happy, and so did I. So sorry to hijack the show for a little bit,
Oh,
but
it's interesting. I was going to lead in with a version of that. I bet I was enjoying your version. And I was going to tie that into our topic today.
it was such a blessing to have you there.
Thanks,
When
man.
I turned around and I had been placed and I put his rear to the wall and I looked up in the stands and I saw my dear Amy Lou up there cheering her little heart out, it meant so much to me. And my kids got to watch the live stream and they sent me text messages, and that was a blessing too. I'm a pretty loud cheerleader.
Yes, you are.
When my daughter does color guard, you can hear me on the judges' recordings, and that's intentional. They're gonna know I cheered for them, and I really felt like I got cheered for this last week, so I really appreciated it.
It's so fun to cheer you on because you really do cheer us all on. You really do.
Appreciate that. But even this last week, we learned, and something we want to talk about is that our minds are a little tricky.
Yes, they are.
They like to play tricks on us.
So I was going to talk about our relationship to ourselves and how that impacts how we relate to others. Because our relationships to ourselves are so important, they can either support or impair our relationships with others. And what I loved about this story about Clifford, our horse, is that everyone had given up on him.
Yep.
They had decided he was no longer going to show, he was no longer going to be in therapy, he was just going to be a pasture pet, and he had lived out his time and he had lived out his purpose, and they'd kind of given up on him. And you didn't. And you had a different story, a different narrative that said, no, there's more in him. And he has a lot more to give. And he enjoys this. And we're going to work at this. And you just had that seed of belief, even when others were saying, nah, I think he's done.
Yeah, I think people thought we were crazy.
Yeah. And I wanted to relate this to how we talk to ourselves, because so often, in fact, I think every human being actually has this opportunity to assess how they relate to themselves. And all of us have absorbed some way of thinking, perceiving, talking to ourselves, some narrative, some internal self talk. It's impossible not to. And a lot of us have some really great self talk. And somewhere along the line, sometimes it's through some impactful experiences or some embarrassing experiences or some insecure, anxious experiences. And sometimes it's just from our humanity and being human. We can unconsciously adopt what I call a negative narrative. And that can play on repeat in our heads, in our minds, in our bodies without us even recognizing it. And I relate this to all the people who are saying, Clifford's done. He's not enough. He's finished. It's over. There's nothing left in him. And a lot of times our critical or internal negative narrative sounds something like that. I'm not enough. I can't do this. I'm insufficient. I'm broken. I'll never be good enough. I have to earn to be okay. I have to be right to be okay. I should. Some kind of critical, judgmental, insecure, anxious, something in this vein runs within us, and it's often unchecked, completely unchecked. Like it just has free reign and free will. And I remember I was completely unaware of mine, completely. I just thought that's how everyone lived their lives, was with this critical, negative voice just talking all the time. And so I remember reading in a book, and I have tried to remember which book this is. I read a lot of books, and I cannot track down where I read this. I wish I could. So sorry that I don't have the reference. But in this book, it talked about listening to how you talk to yourself and just gathering all of those sentences, phrases, narratives, and imagine putting them into a person, visualize a person, sit down on the couch with that person and have that person say back to you all the ways you talk to yourself. And so I did. I spent like a week collecting, listening, noticing, trying to catch how I talk to myself. I imagined this person. I sat them down on the couch across from me. And when I heard these phrases back, I was shocked at how cruel, like just literally, I don't know that there's any other word, like how cruel I was to myself, like all the time at every social event, coming home and just ripping apart every comment or every move or every interaction, or with my kids, always second guessing and attacking and criticizing and playing the victim, and with you feeling like I'm broken, I'm not enough, and just feeling that in so many interactions. Like if you said something sharp, it would be like, of course I messed up because I'm broken. And so these things were just running like free will. And I had that moment when I saw that person on the couch talking to me, and I thought, I wouldn't want that person to be my friend. I wouldn't spend any time with them. And yet that is how I'm relating to me.
Yeah, I have come across in a lot of clients. Like, how do you speak to yourself? And oftentimes they're more cruel to themselves than they would to a stranger, to anyone else in their family. And that voice just degrades over and over again. And you think you can isolate it to yourself and it's only impacting you. But literally, what we're trying to say is if you cannot learn to have a voice that it can pick yourself up, that cannot speak to this negativeness, you can't be whole. And when we talk about relationships and being in relationships, we talk about where we want to be in the middle, which is differentiated. And in that differentiated state, it requires you to be a whole person unto yourself, to be who you are and be okay with who you are. And when this negative voice runs over and over again, you can't be whole. And so even though you feel like you may be isolating it to yourself and that it's not impacting others because you're not being cruel to them, it can't allow you to have an intimate relationship when you speak to yourself like that.
Mm. It really does diminish your capacity to show up, to be you, to step into you. And again, whole does not mean flawless or perfect. Whole means that you are accepting of your strengths and your weaknesses or places that you're developing, your mistakes that you've made, the experiences that you've had, the personality, the character, the tendencies. Like you're accepting of it. And accepting doesn't mean that you don't hold yourself accountable either. But accountable is very different than this negative narrative. Very, very, very different.
I also want to make it really clear that there is mental health problems out there. Depression happens, chemical imbalances, whatever it may be can take place. And so we're not dismissing any of that. We don't want to diminish it and say, hey, you can just get over it by talking nice to yourself. And so please don't take that for what we're talking about. But there really is a process you can go through to help yourself relieve yourself of these negative narratives.
So, speaking to mental health, yes, there are different suicidal, depression, bipolar challenges that definitely, if left untreated, unchecked, let's say on a scale of 1 to 10, they're like 8, 9, 10. Obviously, the process we're talking about would need professional and medical help first. We're talking about the process of people who are mostly functioning, who aren't dealing with a major health crisis that is untreated or undiagnosed. But actually, even if you have this happening and it is really impacting, it may be the clue or the sign that you do need
Right.
some type of
Yeah, I'm not saying
medical
don't
support.
don't get in there and let's dig into it and try these things, but what I also want to be careful is that there's no magic wand to relieve mental health problems, and if there are those, that we want to encourage you to go get professional help to do it. But let's go back to it because you battled this.
Yes, it did.
You discovered like, holy crap, this is not good.
I'm so critical, achievement based, focused, so nervous, anxious about every setting because I had to be flawless. And there was so much pressure coming from me to me.
Yeah, and you'd never be flawless because you're so negative. No matter what, you would always find the negativeness in something.
Yeah.
You'd have an
So
experience,
critical.
and it was always like you would go to the first bad thing that, or even not even bad, something that didn't go perfect. You would pick that out, and that'd be
Yeah.
it.
We do have a negativity bias, and understanding that bias, you can allow yourself to work through it instead of staying stuck in it. Noticing what went well, what didn't go well, noticing what is working, what's not working, and allowing there to be a more balanced view rather than just letting the negative prevail. But when I went through this, I really had a very judgmental, critical, negative narrative. And there was nothing that I did or said or any way that I interacted in my mind, not in reality, but in my mind, that was ever sufficient or enough. And so it kept me in this position of being actually like diminished and boxed in. It actually blocked me from growing because I was so critical and hard on myself. And my anxiety was increasing like all of the time. I wasn't able to process through it. And so that meant like my energy and the way I was showing up was often very nervous, anxious, worried, insecure, uncertain. So it did impact my relationships, not only with you, but with my sexuality, with my children, with friends, like just so much anxiety there.
Yeah, and I do think it's important to talk about. You talk about why we have a bias to the negativity. It's really it goes back to what we talk about our primitive brains trying to protect us, right? And sending those signals out to us that something's wrong, that we got to fix it, we got to fix it, we got to fix it, got to fix it. And this is important for us because as we talk about the steps that we can go through to help calm down this voice, to help change the narrative in which is in our head, not to spin it to something that's not, but to give it to more of a bias of reality instead of a bias of negativity and really know what it really is. And as you go through these processes we're going to talk about, you'll start connecting things together. And as we get to them, I'll probably tell you a story of what happened this last week where I started making some connections and you'll understand why your brain is doing that. But it happens. The primitive brain just does it. It reacts, right? And so it's trying its best to protect you. And in the moment, it thinks it's protecting you, but it's really causing harm.
Right. So our primitive brain is on the lookout for any type of social threat. And a social threat means not belonging, not fitting in, not being feeling like you're part of the group. Obviously, those aren't a crucial threat, but the brain likes to scan environments and likes to be on the watch for that threat because to the primitive brain, again, this is just one part of the brain, but to the primitive part of the brain, if you aren't a part of a tribe, you aren't safe. And so just know that's the wiring that's happening. Luckily, we have all the tools to be able to override this wiring and overcome and process through it. But just know that's like primitively how we are wired. So, the first thing to be able to work through a really critical or a negative or a destructive narrative is first to become aware of how you are talking to yourself because it's so familiar. So, I didn't recognize it until I stopped and was intentionally looking. The familiarness of it often allows it to continue on repeat and perpetually without us even noticing. So, it's this unconscious belief or thought or narrative or self talk about yourself that is critical or fearful or unkind or cruel or diminishing in some way. And you've got to just first be able to start catching it, watching, listening, looking, noticing. And I tell my clients to be doing this at least for a week. Like, just really try and pay attention to how you talk to you, because that is your relationship to yourself, and you're the constant in every relationship. So you are taking that relationship to yourself into every other relationship.
Yeah, I love how you taught me the activity that you have your clients do, and I've had my clients do this too, where you just spend that week thinking about and listening to those narratives.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't try to solve it at first. All you're doing
Mm-mm.
is taking it down and
Yep.
you write them down.
And leave a space.
And you're leaving a space between each one of them. So you write it down, leave some space, write it down, leave some space.
After you've collected all of these types of narratives, what I love to have my clients do is to give it a name. And the reason that we give it a name is to help distinguish it from your authentic self. That this is a false narrative. This is not actually who you are. This is a narrative that has been allowed to have free reign in your mind, but doesn't actually describe or support or help you show up as who you are. And so I wanted to share a few of the names that some of my clients have given. And we like to have you think, okay, as you're looking at all these narratives that you've written on the paper, what character or person or image does this bring up in your mind? And what it does is it actually starts to differentiate those narratives from you. And so, some examples of this: one client named his narrative Smeagol. He was always anxiously chasing his precious wife. If you know anything about Lord of the Rings, Smeagol's always chasing the precious ring. In anxiety, wanting to know that he was enough, trying to chase her so he could feel enough. Another client that I had, she would do what she called freezing people out. So anytime she felt a little bit uncertain or unsure or anxious about herself, thinking, I'm not enough, or I might not do this okay, or I might be wrong, she would freeze. And so she called herself the Ice Queen. And in this frozenness, she would, as she called it, just freeze out everyone. And it was a way to try and keep her safe, but obviously it was no longer working. Another client named his Bulldozer, and he really liked to be right. In fact, his identity of rightness was his sense of rightness was what created his identity. And so what he would do was just bulldoze over people. No, I'm right. No, I'm right. He would jump in and always have to be the lead, the right, prove. And it was because of this actual insecurity, because if he wasn't right, then who was he? So he had this false sense of, I have to be right in order to be okay. Another client named hers Griselda. It brought up this image of this witch because she would get really snappy, and she called it witchy to the way she talked about herself and to her family members and to others, as she thought of, like, if someone wasn't doing, she had this narrative that she always had to do everything correctly. And if someone wasn't doing it correctly, or if she wasn't doing it correctly, or if something wasn't going as planned, then she would get really witchy. And so the witchiness was the clue that she was believing everything had to go as planned all the time. And this idea of having a plan was her idea of safety, but obviously it was actually harming her. Another client named her narrative Karen, because her narrative was always saying, you should have a clean house. You should have better behaved children. You should have sex with your husband. You should. And a should inherently carries shame. And so this Karen was always shaming. Like, even if she did something good with her kids, Karen would say, yeah, you did that, but you should have done this.
Yeah, it really is a kind of canary in the coal mine when you start
Yes.
shooting on yourself and you bring those up. It's that any of the shame that goes around it is really what this isn't really you. This is your narrative, because you can be in a situation and you can have You can struggle in it, but that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you.
Hmm.
And when it becomes shameful, that means there's something wrong with you. And that really should be a sign that, hey, there's something going on here.
Another client named hers Shathid, and I'm going to spell it for you, and then you'll actually know what it says. It's Shithhead. And her narrative was always telling her how terrible she was at everything. And she was literally at the point where she was afraid to try anything because this narrative would just tear down anything she did. Anything. Small, anything, even the way she like got up or got dressed or loaded the dishwasher or took care of her kids or talked to this person or texted, was constantly attacking her. And so, yeah, she called it Shathid. One other client named theirs Eeyore, because nothing was ever going right. Nothing ever went their way. Everything was always broken. And it was this sense of, you'll never be enough. So why try? It's just too hard. You can't do it. Nobody likes you. You might as well give up. And she could visualize this Eeyore. One last one. I had another client who felt like it was his job to fix everything. So his narrative was Mr. Fix It. And if anything went wrong, it was his fault, even if it wasn't his fault. And if anyone was talking to him about anything, literally, even if it had nothing to do with him, he would enter into every situation and conversation. I have to fix this. I have to know the answer. I have to solve this. And then, of course, there was always criticism of the way that he either solved or didn't solve. And obviously, you can't solve
Yeah,
things that
you're
aren't
gonna fail
yours.
when it's not yours.
Right. So constantly feeling like a failure. And so if you have these types of narratives, and I find that we have them in all different flavors and varieties, know that you're totally human and normal. And it's very important to be able to become familiar with them so that you can start to shift out of them. So after you've written them down, you've given it a name, then Greg, you tell them what comes next.
Yeah, so really you're giving it a name and you're understanding it, and you left that space in between the times that you wrote them down. And the reason why you left that space is because we want you to go back and tell the truth about what was really going on in that moment. To use your logical side of your brain to say, okay, this is a narrative. I'm going to think this through and figure it out. And I can now go back and tell the truth about what was going on in that moment.
Yeah. What's more kind? What's more true? What's more helpful? What helps you step into who you want to be? And again, this is not perfection or flawlessness. This is just not cruelty.
And it's not lying to yourself either, right?
No, we're not trying to gaslight or say, oh, everything was just amazing. No, that's not what we're saying. But to be able to say, if you believe that you are never enough, you might approach that in, I am learning these things and I can do these things okay. And I'm developing in this area, right? It's not about flawlessness, it's about a more realistic, kind, compassionate view of yourself.
Yeah, let's give you an example. Like you get to a point where sometimes these aren't as obvious as they once were. When you first kind of listen to it and you name it, you get rid of some of the long-term, long-going narratives that you've had.
Mm-hmm.
But even when you get rid of those, your brain still works in this way where these narratives will come up and you won't even realize what's going
Mm-hmm.
on.
Mm-hmm.
We were in Vegas and Amy was telling me how she didn't like Vegas.
No, I didn't really enjoy
And
Vegas.
I was getting pissed and upset. Not that I want to move to Vegas. I couldn't figure it out. I was really, really
Triggered.
triggered. Yeah, there was
Yeah.
emotions going on in me that I couldn't figure out what was going on.
And I'm looking around at the brown, and I love green. I love plants. I love vegetation. And I'm thinking, I couldn't live here. Like, it's so dry. And I know the desert can be beautiful. I'm not trying to attack the desert, but I just thought I couldn't live here without vegetation. And I just don't like this.
So I even one night asked Amy, I'm like, what are you talking about? And she talked about that. And she talked about, well, as a kid, Vegas is always the exciting place where We go see shows, and I always wanted to come here, and it was exciting. And still, I had this negative narrative going on in me and bringing these emotions up that I could not figure out what was going on.
Yeah, I'm like, why are you protecting Vegas? Like, we're neither for or against Vegas, but I just was thinking, I'm so grateful that I don't live here. Although I loved the horse show, I loved the horse people, we had so many great interactions, but I was just like, I'm really grateful I don't live in Vegas.
And so I had to go and take a moment to listen to the narratives that were running in my mind and take note of them. Because as I said, these kind of go behind the scenes a lot. And you can get emotions firing off of them that you recognize, but don't understand where they're coming from. A lot of time it's coming from this narrative that's going on that you're not really conscious of. And so I spent a lot of time on the flight home, actually, thinking, this is weird. What is going on? And so I just listened to myself for a while. And what came up was this narrative going back to my sexuality. And you go, how the hell does Vegas and the pretty desert or wanting green go back to sexuality? And I thought that myself. I'm like, what's going on? I was like, this is shocking. But when I was a kid, Vegas was the ultimate sign of sin. It was the ultimate, hey, everything bad around sexuality goes on there. Nudity and scanty clad women and whorehouses and all the things that go along with that. And so that's what my mind had tied that to. And in the battle of me overcoming my own anxiety over my own sexuality and what it meant, somehow Amy saying she didn't want to live there because it wasn't green meant she disapproved of my sexuality and that there was something bad with it. And how crazy is that, right? And so I just wanted to share that with you as an example of these narratives. Like I said, maybe they're loud, maybe they're speaking loud and clear to you. And oftentimes when we find our clients first, that's what it is. It's very obvious, right? They can tell you ask them and they give right at the moment, will give you what that narrative is saying over and over to them.
Yeah.
But even when you've worked through those and you've been able to quiet those down and you've said, okay, this is not me anymore, these narratives can run in the background and cause emotions to come up that you can't figure out. And it really does take the time to sit back and try to connect the dots and really have courage enough to say what that is. I wasn't excited to go say, hey, Amy, you know what this is? Because I felt dumb about it. But as soon as I was able to name it and understand what it was, then those narratives quieted down and they no longer ran.
I think that's the power of this. When you can bring the unconscious to your conscious, you actually then have the capacity to be able to change or update or re-engage in a new way. And this again was an opportunity, even though it didn't seem at all related. It wasn't really related to you at all, but it was an opportunity for you to again reaffirm that your sexuality is wholesome and to let go of a past narrative of sexuality being sinful.
That, and also to realize that it's my sexuality.
Yeah.
And that I need to be okay with it and not need validation from you that it's okay.
Yeah.
Somehow it was this domino linking together that was looking for you to validate my sexuality by saying that it was okay to walk down the streets of Vegas and enjoy it, right? It happened even one night when we were down on the strip. And when you get down on the strip, then there's all those crazy people hanging out with very little clothing on, trying to get their picture taken with you, right?
Right, like at Times Square too.
And that's kind of how it linked itself together. That if you were saying that this is okay, then somehow you were validating my sexuality.
Interesting.
But when you were saying you didn't like this and that this, and you weren't even saying that, that's the crazy part. You weren't disliking it because of that, but my narrative had tied it to it.
Yeah, the word Vegas was linked in your mind. It had a different meaning than in mine.
Yep.
I'm talking about vegetation. You're talking about sexuality.
Yeah. How different can that be? Holy shit. You're like, what? So that, I just wanted to give you that example of how sometimes it's unwinding. And it took me a few days to do it. And I unfortunately, I'm sorry that when I get into that place, I also don't react very well. Like just, I don't know. It's heavy. And There's something gnawing at you, but you can't figure out what it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, it's very true. I did have very, very loud narratives, and those, they were like martyr, they were victim, they were anxious, they were I'm not enough, I'm broken. I worked through all of those, and I really did come to a place of I'm just me. I have some great parts, some hot mess parts. I have some developing parts. I have some things that I'll probably never be great at, and that's okay too. Like, I'm really bad at humor. Like, I am just terrible at cracking a joke, but I can appreciate the humor of others, especially because just not that great at it.
Oh no, our youngest son said our family is above average wit. He went off to college and said, I'm really funny. And I think it's because I come from above average wit family. So
I think he was referring to others, not me. But being okay to recognize that and accept that. But there are still times that these narratives, or like you said, other narratives will pop up. And I don't make it mean that something's wrong with me. I look at it as an opportunity then to keep self authoring, keep writing who I am, keep just defining what I want to be and also how I want to relate to me, because that is what I take to others.
again, it's that curiosity to go figure out what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Just like we have to process through feelings
Mm-hmm.
and emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't, those don't just go away.
Mm-hmm.
They come out in a way that we do not respect. These narratives are similar to that. I think it's
They can
because
become like inner demons. That's how I hear
yeah,
a lot of people talk about them.
these
They're
are my
like,
demons that I'm
these are my
fighting.
demons. Yes. And then other people like me, when you're talking about Vegas and vegetation, are just existing and they trigger these, and like for you, it triggered a whole narrative about your sexuality. And then what will happen is that spouse will try and control the other one, be like, you can't talk about Vegas. And you're like, I can't talk about vegetation. And you get into this pattern, not realizing that no, it's actually an opportunity for you to face this narrative and rewrite it and try and understand it, and have some space to have compassion for it, because every time you rewrite that, you become more whole.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is not easy to go do. And we had a lot of people help us along the way. And it's been a blessing that we've been able to help each other. Oftentimes we notice it first in the other person and we can help point some of those things out, not in a critical way, but just in a
Like
curious way.
something
This doesn't add up.
that didn't land right.
Yeah,
Something's going on with
why is
you.
this
What's
happening?
happening for you?
And they can help you work through this. We would love to, if you're having these negative narratives and you can't figure out where they're coming from or why or how to quiet them, we would love to work with you. Please come join us on langfordlifecoaching.com. There's a little button up there that says free consult, and we'd love to have that consult with you.
Yes,
We can chat with you about those narratives and see what great names that you can come up with.
It
you
is
can add
fun
to the
see.
list. You
And
need to make a
people like,
wall or something. The wall.
I've had so many. I feel bad that I can't mention all the clever and witty and just fun ones. And it's fun when you can give it a name, because then you can actually talk to it. You can be like, hey, Griselda, yeah, I know what happens when I listen to you. And when I listen to you, I become a total witch. And that's not exactly who I am. I know that there's more compassion in me than this, and that I want to be able to see this in a new way. So, Griselda, step aside, because now I'm here. Or, different things like that. You can actually have this little conversation, and because it's separate from you, you can engage and work through it where you don't feel like you're destroying yourself.
By the way, for a long time, I thought this was woo-woo silliness. And really working through it and understanding what really is happening in your brain allows me to understand why you can engage yourself this way. And it's not becoming multi-personalities. It's really the two sides of your brain that are there for a purpose. That primitive side of your brain is there to react quickly, to get you out of trouble. And it's going to work on doing that. That's its job. And it's going to do it very quickly. And sometimes we let that thing rule us. And we let it go and go and go and go and go. And that's the problem. And so when we're engaging ourselves, we're literally saying, hey, that primitive side of our brain that's firing like now, I got control. I want to add some of my own logic to this. I'll take this. And that's why engaging it allows us to get out of this. And when I learned the science behind the way that the amygdala will continue to fire chemicals into your body, trying to get your attention, it let me realize, okay, this isn't woo woo. This is really happening in me. That's why I feel it somewhere else. And that's why I can literally tell myself, because I'm speaking to my primitive side of my brain, hey, I got this. I'm going to add logic to it. And it can now relax and say, okay, you take this. It's interesting because it's not possessive.
We're human beings are the only people who can have thoughts about their thoughts.
Yeah.
And so this is what you're doing. You're having thoughts about your narratives. You're having a narrative about your narrative. You're having a conversation with yourself, which we're actually quite capable of doing. And we have so many different parts of our brain. We have to realize that they're there to be able to bring them online instead of just accepting and thinking that, oh,
Yeah.
this has been happening, so it must be true. You've got to have a chance to analyze and be more discerning. And when you are, then you can be more self-authoring and you
Right.
can be more agentic and actually choose how you want to define you instead of just accepting what is.
Right. And that primitive side of the brain, that subconscious, is really good at certain things.
Yep.
And not even just protecting you. I know that when I was shooting archery competitively and we would shoot over and over again, you didn't want to have to think of every step over and over again because you couldn't do it quick enough to react and to shoot and to aim at that target and get that arrow where you wanted to go. And so what you had to do, you had to break it down first enough in your logical side of your brain to think about it, but you wanted to do it the right way and then commit it to your subconscious, commit it to that primitive side of the brain that could just do it without putting logic to it over and over again, that subconscious.
Yeah.
And so again, when it works great. Like how many of you drive to work and don't remember how you got there? Because you've done it so many times, your primitive brain just takes over and it does it. And it can react faster to the things going on around you because it's not trying to add logic to it. When I was shooting that arrow, I could react faster to where the target was and where I was aiming and how the draw on my string was going and the motion I was going to. I could react faster because it was part of my subconscious. Now, when I started shooting and I got where I was missing the target, we had to go back and we had to take it out of my subconscious and go back and break it down again. And I had a great coach that would help me do that. He would watch it and say, okay, wait, you're not quite coming to your anchor point all the way and expanding through your shoulders. And so I would think about expanding through my shoulders and putting my anchor point, and then I'd get back to it. Kind of going back to last week, I think that was great about this coach that got me to, she told me 3 things to do.
Mm-hmm.
And in my last video, I did those 3 things perfectly.
You did.
Now my ride was not perfect, but I could now think about those 3 things and I could commit them to being perfect.
Yeah.
And we can do this too in all the things we do. Some things we want our primitive brain to take over and do, but oftentimes we just allow it to go unchecked and it does things that we really want to add some logic to.
Yeah. I heard someone describe these narratives that pop up as like the pop-ups on your computer where you're going to a site and then all of a sudden you're just like spam, bam, 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 and you have all these like pop-ups blaring at you. And now imagine if you just left those running all the time and how distracting and difficult that would
How
be.
slow you get because it's like everything. Yeah.
Right. So you don't really have control over what's going to pop up, but you do have control over whether or not you're going to engage with it and keep repeating it or whether you're going to shut it down and go back to where you want to be.
No more I think about it, I think that it's a good example of when you try to work on a skill and get better at it and you submit it to your subconscious, because yes, we have these negative narratives that are going on that we want to address too, but sometimes we want our primitive brain and subconscious to take over because it's more efficient and can do things right. And I think maybe that's where I was going when I said, hey, I've gotten over the big, loud, negative narratives. And this Vegas is a good example of kind of, okay, I'm missing the target now. Why?
What happened here?
Yeah. And instead of just going and shooting arrow after arrow and missing the target, it's time to have someone help you look at it and figure out what's going on, or for you to look at it and say, okay, now I need to break down my shot one step at a time to figure out which one part of it's going wrong. And that's when I stopped and broke it down one at a time. Oh, this is what it is. Why? As silly as it can be, this is what it is.
And I think what it does when you stop, give it a name, recognize it, recognize maybe how it makes you feel, like you have that chance then to engage, correct or update or rewrite or however you want to phrase it, and then choose the direction you want to go. Choose how you want to talk to self. Choose to have permission to enjoy being you. Choose to be accountable or choose to be more kind and compassionate. It really is a choice. And I
Yeah.
think we don't realize how much of a choice it is.
And that's what we want. That's bottom line. We want a choice, right?
Mhm.
Going back to the thing we said the very first, this is so important for us to take care of this because it does impact our relationship. My reaction last week to Amy was impactful to her. She could tell that I was struggling and not engaging to her. Before, she would have been offended and probably disengaged. So I appreciate now that she's able to stay in with me and say, hey, this isn't you. But it really is important for us to work on these things so that we can be one whole person, not perfect again, but understand who we are and be okay with that so we can bring that to the other person and be intimate. And it's really important to do.
Mm.
Well, we appreciate you joining us.
We're excited in the next few weeks. We're going to be bringing on some guests for you to enjoy as well. And we're looking forward to sharing those conversations with you. So stay tuned for those.
So go like and subscribe to this podcast. It helps us and everyone that listens. And we appreciate it. Until next time.
Keep undressing your intimacy.
Bye-bye.